This is Trending Daily, and I'm Makhdoom Shahabuddin. Tonight, we are discussing a security issue that has once again placed South Asia at the center of international attention: the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan, two neighboring countries bound by geography, history, and culture, is facing one of its most difficult phases in recent years. What initially appeared to be routine border tensions has now evolved into a deeper security crisis that carries implications not only for the region but for the global counter-terrorism efforts as well. At the core of Pakistan's current policy toward Afghanistan is a very clear strategic position. Islamabad has repeatedly emphasized that it has no territorial ambitions inside Afghanistan. Pakistan does not seek to conquer Afghan land, it does not aim to dictate Afghanistan's internal politics, and it does not seek regime change in Kabul. Instead, the central focus of Pakistan's security policy is defensive in nature. The objective is straightforward: to prevent militant organizations from using Afghan territory as a launchpad for attacks against Pakistan. For several years now, Pakistani security officials have warned that terrorist groups operating from across the border pose a direct threat to Pakistan's national security. Intelligence reports indicate that numerous attacks carried out inside Pakistan, particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the former tribal districts, were planned and coordinated from safe havens located inside Afghanistan. Among the groups frequently mentioned in security briefings are networks associated with Fitna al Khawarij, as well as militant commanders linked to organizations like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Figures such as Noor Wali and Hafiz Gul Bahadur are often cited by Pakistani officials as operating from Afghan territory while directing attacks inside Pakistan against the Pakistani security forces and civilians. From Islamabad's perspective, the challenge is not theoretical, it is operational and immediate. According to security assessments, militants have used areas inside Afghanistan to recruit fighters, train operatives, store weapons, and plan cross-border infiltration missions. These networks then attempt to cross into Pakistan to carry out bombings, ambushes, and targeted attacks against security forces and civilians. Pakistan argues that the pattern of cross-border militancy represents a clear violation of sovereignty. When armed groups use foreign territory to plan attacks inside another state, it becomes not just a bilateral dispute but a serious international security issue. This is why Pakistan's response has evolved over time. Initially, Islamabad attempted diplomacy and dialogue. Pakistani officials repeatedly urged the Afghan authorities to dismantle all the militant safe havens and prevent extremist groups from operating on Afghan soil against Pakistan. However, according to Pakistani security sources, those efforts produced limited results. As militant violence increased, Pakistan shifted toward a more proactive security posture. Security briefings indicate that Pakistan has carried out dozens of precision strikes targeting what it describes as terrorist infrastructures across the border. These operations have reportedly included around 56 targeted strikes against militant hideouts and the destruction of more than 200 suspected terrorist launch pads inside Afghan territory. The purpose of these operations, according to Pakistani officials, is not territorial expansion but threat neutralization. The strikes are designed to dismantle specific facilities used by militants to coordinate attacks against Pakistan. In many cases, these targets reportedly included logistical hubs, weapon depots, and training sites used by the extremist networks. One example frequently mentioned in security discussions is a strike conducted near the area of Bagram airfield. According to Pakistani sources, the operation was aimed at destroying weapons stockpiles and logistical support structures believed to be connected with militant groups planning cross-border attacks. Pakistani authorities emphasize an important distinction in these operations. They argue that their actions are directed against militant infrastructure, not against the Afghan population or the Afghan state itself. The intention, they say, is to protect Pakistan's citizens and security forces from terrorism while avoiding harm to civilians inside Afghanistan. Another important pillar of Pakistan's strategy is border management. The frontier between Pakistan and Afghanistan, commonly referred to as the Durand Line, the international border, stretches over 2,600 kilometers across mountainous terrain, deserts, and remote valleys. This geography has historically made border control extremely difficult. Pakistan has invested heavily in fencing, surveillance systems, and new checkpoints along the Durand Line, the international border, in an effort to control cross-border movement. However, Pakistani officials argue that effective border security requires cooperation from both sides. Islamabad claims that while Pakistani forces maintain strong border vigilance, militant groups continue to move through areas on the Afghan side where enforcement is weak. If attacks from Afghan territory continue, Pakistan has made it very clear that it reserves the right to respond in self-defense. Under the international law, states have the right to protect themselves against armed groups operating from foreign territory when those groups carry out attacks. At the political level, Islamabad's message to Kabul has been very direct. Afghanistan must make a strategic choice. It can pursue peaceful relations and prevent militant groups from operating on its soil, or it can allow extremist organizations to continue destabilizing the region. Pakistan insists that there will be no compromise when it comes to terrorist safe havens. Domestically, Pakistan is also strengthening its internal counter-terrorism framework. The government has revived and expanded the National Action Plan, which serves as the country's central strategy for combating extremism. Security experts believe that improved coordination between federal authorities and provincial governments, particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, will be critical in addressing internal security threats. Strengthening police capabilities, improving intelligence sharing, and enhancing counterterrorism investigations are all part of the broader strategy. But to fully understand the current tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan, we must also examine the deeper dynamics that have pushed the relationship to this point. For Islamabad, the biggest concern remains the presence of militant safe havens inside Afghanistan. The primary organization involved in attacks against Pakistan is the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. After the Afghan Taliban returned to power in Kabul in 2021, many TTP fighters reportedly relocated across the border and began operating from Afghan territory. From these bases, they have carried out cross-border attacks targeting Pakistani soldiers, police personnel, and civilians. Pakistan views these attacks as an existential security threat. The scale of violence in recent years highlights the seriousness of the challenge. Security data indicates that 2025 was one of the deadliest years Pakistan has experienced in more than a decade. Over 3,000 deaths were linked to militant violence, many of them attributed to TTP networks. One of the most dramatic examples occurred during the attack on the Bannu cantonment. Militants attempted to breach the military compound in a coordinated assault. Pakistani security forces ultimately eliminated the attackers, but the incident demonstrated both the capability and determination of the extremist networks. Investigations later linked attackers to militant groups believed to be operating from across the Afghan border. In addition to major attacks, Pakistani border regions have faced repeated infiltration attempts. Security forces have intercepted groups of militants attempting to cross into Pakistan, carrying weapons, explosives, and communication equipment. In one operation during 2025, Pakistani forces reportedly killed more than 70 militants attempting infiltration from Afghanistan. Officials say incidents like these provide clear evidence that militant networks continue to operate on the Afghan side of the border. As these threats increased, Pakistan expanded its counter-terrorism operations. One of the most significant responses was the launch of Operation Ghazab Lil Haq, a military campaign aimed at dismantling militant infrastructure used for cross-border attacks. Pakistani officials described the operation as a targeted effort to eliminate terror hubs and disrupt the networks responsible for violence inside Pakistan. These actions have occasionally led to direct military tensions between Pakistani forces and the Afghan Taliban units, Cross-border firing, drone activity, and localized clashes have been reported along multiple sectors of the border. Some analysts now argue that the situation resembles a limited conflict rather than isolated skirmishes. Another factor complicating the relationship is the long-standing dispute over the Durand Line. Pakistan recognizes the Durand Line as the official international recognized border, while many Afghan political leaders historically rejected this position. Disagreements over border fencing, checkpoints, and crossings have periodically triggered confrontations between the two sides. These disputes create an environment that militant groups can exploit. From Pakistan's strategic perspective, however, the issue is not territorial expansion but national security. Islamabad's argument rests on three key principles. First, Pakistan cannot allow militant groups to use neighboring territory as safe havens for attacks. Second, cross-border terrorism directly threatens millions of civilians and destabilizes the region. Third, the international law recognizes the right of states to defend themselves against terrorist bases that launch attacks across borders. Based on these principles, Pakistani officials argue that defensive military actions are justified to protect sovereignty and ensure national security. The conflict also has wider regional implications. Instability along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border could affect trade routes connecting South Asia to Central Asia. It could disrupt humanitarian operations inside Afghanistan, and it could provide opportunities for extremist groups to expand their influence across the region. However, Pakistan maintains that lasting peace will only be possible if militant networks operating from Afghan soil are dismantled. Without addressing the root cause of cross-border terrorism, temporary ceasefires or diplomatic statements will not solve the problem. Ultimately, Pakistan's official position remains consistent. The conflict is not with the Afghan people. Pakistan recognizes the deep cultural, religious, and historical ties that bind the two nations. The real challenge lies with militant organizations that exploit Afghan territory to destabilize Pakistan. Until those networks are eliminated, Pakistan believes defensive actions will remain necessary to protect its citizens and its sovereignty. The future of Pakistan-Afghanistan relations will depend on whether meaningful cooperation can be achieved in the fight against terrorism. If both sides work together to dismantle militant infrastructure and secure the border, stability can return to the region. But if extremist groups continue to operate freely and launch attacks across borders, tensions may persist. For Pakistan, the message is clear. Peace is possible, cooperation is possible, but security is non-negotiable. You were watching Trending Daily. This is your host, Makhdoom Shahabuddin. See you next week.